Well, GLUON was sort of born out of an apartment in New York back in the 90s. And what happened is I moved to New York as an aspiring musician in the late 80s. And like all musicians, I had to go get a real job at some point. And so I ended up, through various circumstances, getting into the early stages of desktop publishing. I was comfortable working with computers at the time, and so my earlier jobs were creating graphs for college algebra books, and that was a great job because it required a lot of repetitive actions using an early version of Adobe Illustrator. So I learned Illustrator really well, and the better you learned software back then, the better job and the better pay you could get. So prior to that, I'd always been a computer programmer, so it's something that I saw immediately tied in with my computer programming experience. So my desktop publishing experience very soon converged, because as I would go through these various different jobs and inevitably to the ad agencies in New York City, where I was working in the early 90s, I found there were workflow issues or automation things that should be automated, that I was doing repetitive tasks like resizing documents or having to replace lorem ipsum text with with the real text over and over again. So I started to see these things as interesting challenges for a programmer, and it just so happens at the time that Quark had invented the whole concept of extensions, which is the same as a plugin, basically. And this is before Adobe or anyone had any plugins. Tim Gill, who invented Quark Express, invented Quark Express extensions, which was a brilliant idea. Excuse me. That allowed third parties to develop software that extended Quark Express. But just to back off the story a little bit, I had met someone at one of the places I worked very early on, who's now working here at GLUON. We've been together for that many years, since really the late 80s. And he was also a musician and also a programmer. And so really in the beginning of the 90s, we wrote music software, and then we would write some plugins and extensions for our own personal work. And it wasn't until other people had started seeing what we were using for our own personal work that the demand became clear, to us, that, well, we could probably sell these to some places. And what was funny is as I freelanced in a few places in New York, I found that our software has legs, and so our little plugins, our extensions that we were writing back then, had already sort of been pirated throughout a lot of the ad agencies, especially ProScale and some of the other ones, because we didn't have copy protection at the time.
Right.
But that was that let us know that we had a little potential business there. So we started to set that business up throughout the 90s and developed a full line of extensions, actually. And so GLUON started in an apartment, became an office in the city. We had a very nice little office pretty near where the World Trade Center was, unfortunately, during that period. And after that calamity, we moved out of the city to our present offices here in New Jersey, and then we have been acquired quite appropriately by Quark, because Quarks and GLUONs naturally go together well. If you ever Google either one of them, you'll see that they've been together since the Big Bang, so that's kind of a nice thing to see. So since the since the late 90s, we've started moving into the world of web to print and furthering the automation technologies of database publishing and this sort of thing, while keeping the extensions and also the InDesign plugins going too. So we're doing a lot of the same tools that we've developed and perfected over the years, and then evolving into the new web to print world and just web applications in general.